Now, we do have to admit that there's nothing better than seeing a beautiful red tomato ripening on your own tomato vine. But there is a problem with this. We're here to explain the facts about vine ripening. We'll explain which tomatoes taste the best, vine ripened or those picked earlier and ripened indoors. And we're not talking about supermarket tomatoes because they don't count. They rarely taste good and they often have a different texture. So as much as we hate to admit it, it's probably best not to vine ripen your tomatoes. And this is not because of taste. Tomatoes ripened on the vine will taste just as good as, or maybe even a little better than those ripened indoors. But if you leave them to ripen on a vine, you might not get a chance to taste them at all. So at what stage of development do you harvest your tomatoes? When they've reached a full stage of maturity, so when they've got as large as they're going to get. Secondly, is the colour. So let's get started by looking at the stages of tomatoes as they ripen. The first stage is green. The tomato's reached its full size and it's a mid-green all over. The next stage is the breaker stage. This is when tomatoes start to change colour. The green becomes lighter and you'll get a tinge of pink. Then we have turning. The fruit starts to turn a real pink. And then we've got red, and that means it's ripened. So what is the problem with vine ripening tomatoes? Is that if you leave them on the vine, they can be suspect to damage from birds, from insects, from rodents, you name it. And you can also get sun scald. We like to harvest our tomatoes when they just start to change colour like this, because we know they're at their full size and we know that the ripening process has actually started. But if you do want to leave your tomatoes on the vine, then here are a few tips to help you avoid some of that crop loss. Start with pruning, especially pruning growth so that none of the foliage touches the soil. You'll make a good start, and we have a separate video on that. So with this tomato here, we'll be taking off that, we'll be taking off that, and we'll also be taking off this one here, as well as that one. And that one there will eventually touch the ground, so it can come off as well. Netting is the next step, and this can stop birds and possums. However, if you net early, it can also stop pollinators from getting to the tomato flowers. So hand pollination may be needed, and we have a separate video on that as well. Aim for a regular watering cycle, not wet-dry cycles. However, even all of this will not stop some crop loss. So you may want to sacrifice a little taste for less loss. So at what stage do you pick your tomatoes? The earliest stage, when the tomato is fully green, is not a time to pick them. The earliest is the turning stage, when that deep green starts to lighten significantly and you get a little bit of pink coming through. Or wait until they're really pink. And if you think vine ripening is a myth, do what we've done. Harvest tomatoes off the same plant at breaker, pink and red stages. Do a taste test. The second part of when to pick tomatoes is the time of day, and that time is in the morning as soon as the tomatoes are dry from any overnight dew. And how do you pick them? Use pruners or secateurs. Pulling them off with your hands can often rip the stem and damage the top of the tomato. And if you're going to leave the tomatoes to ripen indoors, that opens the tomato up to disease. So when do we harvest our tomatoes? Usually at somewhere between the pink and the red stage. It does depend a little bit on the season. If we've pruned properly and if we've netted and we don't have any evidence of pests, we'll leave them until they ripen fully. As soon as we start to see evidence of crop loss through pests, then we pick them at the pink stage. Once you've harvested your tomatoes, how do you ripen them indoors? Indirect light. Temperature of around 20 degrees Celsius, that's around 70 Fahrenheit. Good ventilation and airflow, it's well for us. And if you're looking for a recipe, this is basil pesto with tomato and avocado, and we've got links to that recipe in the notes below the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for for regular updates on a whole range of matters related to growing tomatoes, and indeed the whole vegetable garden, and ornamentals as well.